Officer Rogers, thank you so much for your testimony and your service to this country. Next witness.
Your Honor, our next witness is remote, and so it might just take about 1 minute. I think they're all ready. We just have to let them in, and it will now be under Congressman Eric Swalwell. Your Honor, the petitioner is called Congressman Eric Swalwell. Okay, he's coming right now. Sorry for the delay. Here he is, Your Honor. Thank you, Congressman Swalwell. Just 1 moment while we get the tech set up.
No problem.
There we go. Okay. Good afternoon. Congressman, can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Merman.
Oh, sorry. Oh. Well, and we have a siren again.
Congressman Swalwell, can you hear us?
Yes, Your Honor.
Great. Will you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear under the penalty of law that the testimony you will give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Congressman Swalwell. Could you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Swalwell, and I represent the 14th Congressional District of California.
How long have you been a member of Congress?
Going on 11 years, elected in 2012, and sworn in on January 3, 2013.
We got it. Were you at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, 2021?
Yes, it was.
And what was supposed to happen in Congress that day?
We were sworn in 3 days earlier, and on the 6th, that was the day where the Congress votes to certify the electoral college that were sent from December after the ratified of states.
I'm going to ask you some more questions about January 6th, 2021, but first I'd like to ask you some questions about prior presidential elections. When, if ever, had you participated in Congress's counting of electoral votes for president before January 6th, 2021?
I have also participated in the January 6th, 2013 certification for the re-election of President Barack Obama. I have also participated on January 6th, 2017 for the election of President Donald Trump.
And does Congress always count the votes on January 6th?
Yes, every 4 years on January 6th. Again, new Congress is sworn in on the 3rd, and then on the 6th is when the certification is.
In your experience, what is the process for counting and certification of electoral votes?
What's called a joint session in the House and the Senate are in the Congress. The Vice President of the United States, the President of the Senate, presides over the count, and each state alphabetically has their votes called. If there's an objection, you need somebody to meet your objection from the other chamber. So, for example, if a House member objects, a senator would also have to object, and then both bodies would go after their chambers and debate the objection, and then come back for resuming.
And how are those objections resolved?
They're resolved through debate and then a vote.
And I think you testified about this, but what role does the vice president play in those proceedings generally?
As the president of the Senate, the vice president presides over the count. There are tellers who are seated just below the vice president from both chambers, both parties. They tally the counts that are sent from the states, and the vice president literally, kind of like in the award show, opens up the count and reads how the state went for each individual.
In 2016, were there objections to the counting and certification of electoral votes from any state?
Do you mean in 2017?
Yes, I'm sorry, arising out of the 2016 election, so on January 6, 2017.
I do recall there was at least one, perhaps more Democratic House objections, but I also recall there was no senator to sign off, so to speak, or co-sign on the objection, and so we never adjourned for debate.
And so what happened with those objections?
I remember Vice President Biden was in the chamber, and Vice President Biden asked if there was a senator who also objected, no senator objected, and the Vice President would open up the envelope, look at the votes sent from the state, and they would just alphabetically proceed to the next state.
And did you object to the counting or certification of any electoral votes?
Not in 2013 and not in 2017.
Do you recall any of the objectors in 2017, on January 6, 2017, suggesting that then Vice President Biden, as President of the Senate, could have rejected any of the electoral votes submitted by the states?
No, I do not recall that ever coming up in any caucus meetings or any public representations.
And what do you recall, if anything, about anyone suggesting that then Vice President Biden, as President of the Senate, could declare Hillary Clinton the winner of the 2016 election?
My recollection has never discussed by any of my House colleagues.
Before late 2020 or early 2021, had you ever heard anyone suggest that the Vice President, as President of the Senate, had discretion to reject electoral votes from states?
I would not hear that line of argument until after the 2020 election from the former President Donald Trump.
And did then Vice President Biden try to do any of those things during the counting and certifying of the 2016 presidential election?
He did not. If there was not a senator to match the House member's objection, he moved on with the count.
Do you recall any candidate or colleague suggesting that Congress should ignore the Constitution and certify the election for the winner of the 2016 popular vote?
I don't recall that.
And did any person supporting any candidate for president, to your knowledge, attack the Capitol on January 6, 2017?
That definitely did not happen on January 6, 2017.
And are you aware of anyone ever attacking the Capitol during Congress's counting and certification of presidential electoral votes in the history of our country prior to January 6, 2021?
Certainly not in my lifetime, and not any knowledge I have of the Congress history.
I now want to turn to the 2020 election. Did you have any concerns in the weeks and months leading up to the 2020 presidential election about whether Mr. Trump would accept the results of the election if he lost?
I did, and that was the evening of the election when a statement was made by the president early in the morning, essentially, or not essentially, saying that the election was rigged. And then, to be honest, prior to the election, the president would not honor reporters' requests to accept the outcome of the election. He lost, and then, of course, on the night of the election, he had said in his first public statement that he believed it was rigged. And then weeks after the media declared Joe Biden as the president-elect, and the state certified the election outcomes, and the lawsuits that the president has brought had all been dismissed in the courts, the president ramped up his rhetoric in public appearances and on Twitter. And one that I recall was an invitation in mid-December via Twitter for people to come to the Capitol on January 6th, and stating in the tweet, "We'll be quiet."
You testified just there that there were legal challenges that you were aware of brought by Mr. Trump to the 2020 election. By December 14th, 2020, are you aware of what the status of those legal challenges was?
December 14th, if I recall, is the date where states are certifying their counts. Every challenge to the state's counting and doing their certification had been dismissed or dropped by the presidency.
Following the state certification of electoral votes on December 14th, 2020, what was your understanding as to whether Mr. Trump had any further legal avenues to challenge the 2020 election?
In my understanding, was the next step in the process was the January 6th certification, and then the January 20 inauguration for President-elect Biden. That was it. Let's
turn now to January 6th, 2021. What was your role in the counting and certification process on January 6, 2021?
I was told the day before by Speaker Pelosi that she would like me to resign as the Speaker designate at noon on January 6th to gavel us in, so to speak. And so the day starts, every congressional day starts with the Speaker gaveling the Congress in. And so I gavel us in, led us in pledge allegiance. There was a new chaplain to the Congress, and asked the chaplain, as we do every opening session, asked the chaplain to lead us in prayer. And then I read an appointment of the tellers that each side, each party, each chamber had designated to participate in the count on January 6th. And I adjourned, and all of that lasted no more than 10 minutes.
I'm going to back you up just briefly. What did you do that morning before the certification process began?
I ran from the residence I have in Washington, D.C. to the Capitol, and then back. It's a run I do often. And I recall on the run back from the Capitol, actually running up North Capitol, seeing dozens of individuals carrying signs that read "Stop the Steal" and wearing body armor and military fatigues. And I remember pulling down the cap that I was wearing. It was pulling over my face because I didn't want to be seen by this crowd or recognized by this crowd. But it certainly just gave me an unsettled feeling about the direction the day was headed.
Did you watch any of Mr. Trump's speech on the ellipse that day?
I did. Once I returned to the Capitol, and after I opened the session, I was on the floor with my Democratic colleagues, and many of us had our phones out, and then we were watching the speech on the floor. We would step off the floor into this area called a cloakroom, which is just split steps from the floor, and there were televisions on in the cloakroom playing the speech from the president and his supporters at the ellipse.
And what was your reaction to that speech, or the parts that you saw of it?
Well, in the weeks before January 6th, the president had fired up his supporters with claims that the election was rigged, said the 6th was going to be violent, and it came together on the 6th. Just from what I saw, individuals on the streets of Washington, and then what I saw in the speech, it appeared that an angry mob had assembled around the Capitol and near the White House. And when the president said that his supporters must fight like hell and they won't have a country anymore, that worried me because we were undergoing the process certifying the election loss. And when he aimed at the Capitol by saying that he was in solidarity going to the Capitol with them, that we're going to go to the Capitol, a lot of us in the cloakroom looked at each other in a, oh God, what does this mean for us? Kind of feel.
So how did the counting and certification of electoral votes on January 6, 2021 go?
So after I recessed the meeting, took a break for about 50 minutes, and then Speaker Pelosi and Vice President Pence, as the President said, would next reconvene the House and the Senate in the House chamber. And as I said, it begins alphabetically. So on the Democratic side, because of COVID, only members of leadership and members from the states that were going to have to defend the vote were on the House floor. Any other Democrat would have to watch in the gallery. So there were no more than 2 dozen or so of myself and others on the House floor. I should have had at that time as a member of House leadership. And so Arizona was the first state to be challenged. And if I recall, Congressman Gosar, all Gosar in Arizona, challenged the Arizona vote. The Vice President asked if there was a senator who would co-sign the challenge, and I believe it was Senator Cruz from Texas who signed off. And so we adjourned the joint session, meaning the senators left to go to their own chamber for debate. We stayed in our chamber, and Speaker Pelosi took the gavel to kick off the debate on the matter of Arizona.
At some point thereafter, you learned that rioters had breached the Capitol, correct?
Myself and everyone around us on the floor had our phones out and were watching intently on what was happening around the Capitol. We were also receiving a number of Capitol police alerts. There's an internal email system for members of staff, and the alerts were telling us about the mob that was assembling around the Capitol. Capitol office buildings that were closed, suspected pipe bombs around the Capitol that had been discovered. And so we were focused on the debate, but also security posture, whether it was watching Twitter or receiving the Capitol police alerts, was also right in front of us.
And about what time was this happening?
This was between 1 and 2 o'clock. We watched either people who were in the mob and staged at the Capitol during the stage, or people who were at the ellipse and moved toward the Capitol after the stage.
What was the first thing that occurred that was unusual to you inside the Capitol?
Well, first, I would say watching the mob on their devices below pass with force various security perimeters was unusual. I've never seen anything like that before. But also on the floor, Speaker Pelosi was presiding in the House chamber, and abruptly she was asked to step off the podium, and her security detail took her off the floor. And I also noticed Mr. Hoyer, who was the majority leader, Stan Hoyer of Maryland, and James Clyburn of South Carolina, who was the majority whip, also their details hurriedly went to them and took them off the floor.
And about what time was that?
This was in the 1 o'clock, it's a mid 1 o'clock hour. And at that point, James McGovern, who was a Rules Committee chairman from Massachusetts, he stepped up to the podium, and so it was a seamless transition. The debate did not stop. He stepped up to the podium and presided over the debate on the matter of Arizona.
After Speaker Pelosi and the other members of leadership that you mentioned were moved out of the chamber, you said debate continued for about how long did debate continue?
For probably another no more than 30 more minutes. It may have been even fewer.
What happened next in terms of safety recommendations?
Mr. McGovern suspended debate, and a Capitol Police officer went to the podium. I remember it being the lower podium, so the podium where the speaker presides. There's 2 podiums, it was called the rostrum. The other podium is where the speaker presides. That's where I got to say, that's where Speaker Pelosi has presided, that's where the governor presided. The lower podium, if you think about State of the Union, is where the president speaks. So a security officer went to that lower podium and told the members that there were people unauthorized inside the building, and that Capitol Police was dispersing tear gas, and that we were to reach under our seats and pull out a gas mask and be ready to put it on in case something had dispersed tear gas inside the chamber, and also be ready to move through evacuation room.
Had you ever had to put a gas mask on in the Capitol House chamber before?
I didn't, until that moment, I did not know that there were gas masks under our seats, and he had also never before rehearsed any type of scenario. So first, there was just, I think people were surprised that they were even there. Instead of often every day, just didn't know.
Who were you sitting with at that time?
I had moved from sitting with Arlie and Sherry Russos early in the debate over to Congressman Ruben Gallego of Arizona. His wife had reached out to me. She was worried that Ruben would probably not follow orders of the Capitol Police, and that he would want to fight them out, or the protesters. And so she asked me if I could just look out for Ruben. And so I went over and sat with the guy.
And what can you tell us about Congressman Gallego's training?
So I knew, most of our colleagues knew, that Ruben had served a combat mission as a Marine in the Iraq War. And so as we were pulling out the gas masks, he saw immediately that I had no idea how to use or reopen the gas mask. And so he started having women first throw him or toss him their gas masks. And he was ripping them open, sometimes using his teeth to rip them open, and was just handing out the gas masks and telling people to not breathe too quickly, because that could lead you to pass out. He and I agreed that we would take off our coats so that our congressional pins were not obvious if they hadn't moved to any of the riders, and also so that we had more freedom of movement. He also handed me a pen that was sitting on the table where he was prepared to debate for Arizona, and he said to me, as pen, he said, if any of them near you, just put this in her neck.
So what was going through your mind at that moment?
A lot. Uncertainty. Disbelief that this was happening, that we were taking our coats off, that we were looking for weapons or trying to use gas masks. At that point, is we're waiting for the security officer to give us further instructions. The chaplain, who I had asked to lead us in the prayer earlier in the day, went back up to the podium and uninvited, unannounced, just started reading from that lower podium a prayer, and she asked all of us if we would pray with her.
What, if anything, did you notice being done to secure the chamber at that time?
So after I and colleagues prayed, I noticed that Capitol Police officers were, along with some of our Republican members, Republican colleagues, were pushing furniture against the back door. So if you think of the State of the Union is probably the best way to orient yourself. The door that the president wants through the State of the Union, that's the back of the chamber. Those double doors have glass panes on them. And so furniture was being moved to block those doors because we could hear the pounding on those doors and shouting of the riders outside. In the front of the chamber, where the rostrum is, where the podiums are, the speakers, there's 2 massive portraits. There's the portrait of George Washington, that's on the Democratic side, and there's a portrait of General Lafayette, the French general from the Revolutionary War, that's on the Republican side. So on the Democratic side, right behind the portrait, is a set of double doors that takes you off the floor, and your glass doors. So I could see through the glass doors in what's called the speaker's lobby that Capitol Police were stacking furniture and chairs against the doors that lead into the speaker's lobby. They were stacking them as high as they could stack them with what they had. We sat, as I said, and waited for instructions on the evacuation.
How would you characterize the group of people gathered outside the Speaker's lobby in the House chamber at that time?
I could mostly just hear the sounds of the banging over the screen. I would not see that in the photo.
And how would you characterize those sounds? What did it sound like?
It was harmful, and I say that because the chamber is mostly windowless, and so just having been alerted on our phones that suspected bombs were found around the building, and watching the violence against the police officers and seeing the mob had reached multiple perimeters and had come closer to the chamber, it was really just the uncertainty of what they wanted or what they would do.
How concerned were you for your personal safety at that moment?
It was escalating as it went from gas masks to a pen in the hand to a prayer from the chaplain, and it was when the chaplain read that prayer that I finally texted my wife, so that I did not want to text her that day. Essentially, telling her, we're going to be fine, it's okay, I didn't want to worry throughout the morning.
During the attack on the Capitol, were you following Mr. Trump's tweets?
I was. As I said, almost all of my colleagues, we had our phones out, and we were reading our phones and following the tweets and the lips, speeches, and listening to the videos.
And why were you following his tweets?
We connected the president's tweets to our own safety in the chamber, and also the integrity of the proceedings that were taking place.
I'm going to ask for Exhibit 148 to be displayed, please. And Your Honor, this exhibit has been stipulated by all sides. This is one of Mr. Trump's tweets.
Okay, are you going to do it?
I am offering it into evidence, Exhibit 148, Your Honor. And this is a long exhibit, so we're only going to look at 2 tweets of the whole compilation. So this tweet is on page 83, and it has a timestamp of 2:24 p.m. on January 6, 2021.
Okay, Exhibit 148 is admitted.
Congressman Swalwell, can you see the exhibit on your screen?
Yes, I see the tweet from the verified account.
And do you remember reading this tweet while you were in the chamber?
Yes, it was the timestamp request when I called. The time that I called, you still on board, which is 2:21 p.m. on 6.
And how did you interpret this tweet? What did you interpret it to mean?
I interpreted that the president, the vice president, was refusing to do something that could overturn the outcome the president wanted. But again, for my personal safety and the proceedings we were engaged in, the colleagues that I was with, we interpreted it as argument needed on Capitol, because that's what the vice president was when it was.
And can you read the tweet, Congressman?
Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth! Exclamation point.
Did you notice any change in what was happening outside the chamber after this tweet was sent?
Well, we didn't feel more safe, but it wasn't as if the mob subsided. We continued to be updated by facts that they were trying to secure an evacuation path. I think we should stand ready. The shout will continue.
Representative Swalwell, could you just speak up to you?
Sure.
You're starting to trail just a little bit.
Yeah, I'm happy to repeat that too.
If you wouldn't mind.
Sure. But the tweet was said, we did not feel more safe. It wasn't as if the mob subsided. And so we waited, and this was near the point where we would ultimately leave the floor. But you could still hear the sounds of the pounding outside of the chamber and the screaming of.
When at some point you were led out of the chamber, is that correct?
Yes, and the security officer went to that motor home and told us there was an evacuation group and that we were to go in the direction of the Lafayette portrait. Again, 2 sides. One is Washington, that's where they were stacking chairs. The other was the Lafayette portrait next to it. So we were told to go in that direction.
I think it's them. It is. It's the whole WebEx window. Sorry, Your Honor, small tech issue. Did the entire WebEx go down? Okay.
The WebEx seems to still be on.
Okay.
Congressman Swalwell, we're just having a technical problem.
No problem.
Okay. Should I wait?
Let's wait a minute.
Yeah.
If it doesn't go through, it's a minute. You can still hear it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, let's just, I just want to make sure that the court reporter could continue. She couldn't see him for lip briefing, but she says she can, so why don't we continue while they work on the technical issue?
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. Congressman Swalwell, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I just can't hear him.
Oh, can you say something, Mr. Swalwell?
Yes, I'm on mute now.
Okay.
It doesn't help me on my end.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll be back to visual in just a moment. Did you play a role in the evacuation of the chamber?
No, the brave police officers were the ones who asked us to leave. Being a rule follower, I immediately started to follow the police officers who were asked to leave. But I did see my colleague Ruben Gallo, who is not a rule follower, did not follow the orders of the police. And I saw that he was standing on house chairs, yelling at the members in the gallery that they were going to be okay, and just reminding them about their gas masks. And so I went back to the Washington side of the chamber, the Washington Court side, and started yelling, Ruben, time to go, we gotta go, and was ultimately able to get Ruben to walk out of the chamber.
And what path did you take during the evacuation?
So we went out of the doors near the Lafayette porch, which is the Republican side of the chamber. And there's a long hallway that those doors lead into. It's called the speaker's lobby. Not a COVID time, that's where the press corps assembled and interviewed members. There were no press at the time because of COVID restrictions. And so I went out that door and then down the stairway that was just off that exit.
When you were starting to leave, did you notice that was there anybody still in the chamber?
There were still police officers in the chamber. As I said, there were one or two Republican colleagues who were standing at the double doors at the back of the chamber, helping push the furniture against the doors. But Gallo was one of the last ones on the floor, and so I finally pulled him out. And as we were leaving, I looked down the long hallway of the speaker's lobby at where they had stacked the chairs and saw the mob pressed up against the glass doors at the end of the mall.
When you were leaving the chamber, were there any people left in the gallery?
Unfortunately, the gallery colleagues of mine were not able to leave at the same time that we were. I did look out at the gallery a number of times, especially when we were with Congressman Gallo was yelling at them. Many of them were lying under the chairs of the gallery. Some of them had their gas masks on. Some of them looked like they were in kind of like a prayer group, praying together. But the Capitol Police later learned that the impeachment had not yet secured the exit for the third floor doors.
Okay. And what was your reaction to seeing those members and staff in the gallery?
Mortified. We felt helpless that the police were not able to get them out, and frankly felt the guilt that I was able to leave and they were still out there.
You testified a moment ago that the path you took led you through the speaker's lobby. How long did you stay in the speaker's lobby?
We were encouraged to move as quickly as we could, but I learned you can only move as fast as the people in front of you, and with hundreds of members leaving the floor, there were fits and starts, and so we would move and we would stop and cluster, and the evacuation would last, I would recall, well over 10 to 15 minutes. Yes.
Did you hear anything as you exited the chamber?
As I was leaving the chamber and going through the speaker's lobby, I did hear what sounded like a gunshot. I did not see it, and I was in the mix of members who were trying to move as fast as we could to follow.
And when did you ultimately make it to a safe location?
It took, as I said, at least 10 to 15 minutes, and so I would say sometime just before 3 o'clock or near 3 o'clock.
Who else from Congress did you meet up with there?
House leadership had been taken off the floor when Speaker Pelosi was taken off the floor. So anyone who remained on the floor was members of Democratic leadership, members from states that were defending their vote, and then most of my Republican colleagues. It didn't appear that they had the same COVID restrictions that we had on our side. And so that group moved together off the floor. Eventually in the evacuation room, our colleagues from the gallery would join us, members of the press corps would join us, and then members of the leadership staff who worked in offices in the Capitol would join us.
Once you were in that location, were you receiving updates as to what was going on in the Capitol and outside?
The Sergeant of Arms, who is the individual charged with House security, moved with us and was in the room when we arrived. And so he routinely gave us updates, and he frankly felt like being on a delayed flight with attack. Felt the same thing every 15 minutes, which was that the Capitol was under attack. They were trying to get more resources to clear the Capitol, but we would have to stay there until the Capitol was cleared, and that was every 15 to 20 minutes.
Was there communication in that location between you and your colleagues about what was happening outside?
Certainly, yes. It was Republicans and Democrats in the same room. And at one point, I do recall that the Sergeant of Arms had kind of loosely implied that they may be bringing buses to the site, and that we would leave in buses. And I was seated next to, most of the time, next to Congressman Adam Schiff. And I do remember Mr. Schiff vocalizing that we should not leave, we should stay, and that essentially the worst thing to do, if there's an attempted coup taking place, is to leave to the site of the coup, that we need to go back to the Capitol and finish the count.
I'm going to now show...
I also recall, sorry, Ruben Gallego also, because I remember asking Gallego that we consider the buses, and Gallego was asking that, just I remember the phrase, that we would be sitting ducks and got on the bus and left, that would be the worst thing for us, for our business.
At some point that afternoon, are you aware that Mr. Trump made a statement?
Yes, I remember multiple statements and the video. Yes.
And I'm going to have Mr. Heim bring up exhibit number P68. Your Honor, this is also a stipulated exhibit.
68 submitted.
And can you remember seeing this video, Congressman Swalwell?
Yes, I did.
Can you play the video, Mr. Heim? It indicates there's an issue with the WebEx audio.
Mr. How much longer do you have with them? I know you're going to we should break lunch and people can figure out the technology.
I've probably got about another 10 or 15 minutes.
I mean, I was hoping to get through direct before lunch, but I'm worried that the technology might take some figuring out.
Okay, that's fine, Your Honor.
And it may be that it's not possible to play the video over WebEx with sound, so hopefully your tech people can talk to the court's tech people and we'll figure something out.
I can also have the video played locally for Congressman Swalwell, because everybody here can see the video, I think. So maybe that's an option too.
Okay, why don't we figure that out, because I'd like to see the video.
Okay, yeah. And it's only 1 minute, it's short.
Okay, let's take a break. We will reconvene at 1:15, and hopefully somebody on your team can talk to Alan and I keep people here and figure it out.
We'll work very hard to do that. Thank you, Your Honor.
Representative Swalwell, can you hear us? I think he's on. Can you hear us, Representative Swalwell?
Yes, I can.
Great. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Congressman Swalwell. Before we go to the video that halted us for a little bit there, I wanted to circle back and ask you a question about earlier in the afternoon. Do you recall Vice President Pence issuing a statement that day before the certification began?
I do. I recall being, I believe, like the 1 o'clock hour, almost right as we got there.
And what was in the statement, if you can recall?
I recall it was written in like a Dear Colleague fashion. He's a member of Congress, so that makes sense.
One second, sorry. Court reporter asking for a tech pause. Yes, can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I think, yeah, can we start over with that answer? Do you recall what was in the statement, Congressman?
I recall it being printed in the cloakroom and being passed around to members. I remember being written as a Dear Colleague, which is the way that members communicate to each other, and hence, of course, as President of the Senate, who's also a member of Congress, so to speak, and a former member. And I thought it was interesting they voted in that format, but it essentially informed us that he would not be stepping outside what he believed his constitutional duties in the county of those.
I'm sorry.
Just one pause again. It's okay. Okay. So just in follow-up to that, so you testified that he stated that he would not be stepping outside his bounds. Can you explain what you mean by that?
It was well known among myself and my colleagues in the public that President Trump believed that Vice President Pence had the ability to essentially reject the electoral ballots that were sent from the states. And so in the 1 o'clock hour, I do recall being handed from the cloakroom a dear colleague that Pence had sent, essentially saying that he did not believe he had the authority to do what the former president was asking him to do, and that he would not step outside the ceremonial duty of adding up the electoral ballots and declaring them.
Okay, great. Okay, let's try with Exhibit P68, please, Mr. Hine.
I know you're paid. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. We have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You see what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. You know how to feel. But go home and go home in peace.
You recall seeing that video on January 6, 2021?
Yes, I do.
And do you recall approximately what time that video came out?
I recall that being in the 3 o'clock hour, but I don't really remember.
What, if anything, changed after Mr. Trump issued this statement?
As I said, we were still in a holding pattern at the evacuation site, being told by the sergeant at arms that the rioters were still inside the Capitol. And so, at least when it was said, when the statement was made, there was still an active attack on the Capitol. Now, I would watch on Twitter, I think in the minutes after the statement, footage of individuals being interviewed or making their own posts that were being posted saying that Trump told them to go home, it was time to go home. So and these were rioters who were there in the Capitol. So we do recall, I do recall being with my colleagues and seeing that statement had at least an effect on some of the people who were posting on social media.
And at this time, you're still in the secure location, correct? It's P148, Your Honor, which we've already stipulated into evidence, and this is just a different page from that tweet, that compilation of tweets.
Okay.
Do you see the tweet on your screen, Congressman Swalwell?
Yes, sir. Yes.
And can you read it?
This is the tweet from the former president's verified account at 6:01 on January 6th, saying, "These are the things in defense that happened when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever!" Exclamation.
And where were you when this tweet came out?
I was still with my colleagues in the evacuation room, not too far from now.
And so this, as you testified a moment ago, it was about 6 p.m. on January 6th.
That's right.
And what happened, if anything, after this tweet came out?
We were still being updated by the sergeant at arms that reinforcements and law enforcement were on the way to clear the Capitol, that rioters were still in the building. It wasn't safe for us to go back. And about this time, Speaker Pelosi also arrived with other members of leadership and told us that she had been on the phone with the Vice President, the Department of Defense, and local governors about getting the National Guard to the Capitol as well so that we could go back and finish the count.
At some point, did Congress resume counting and certifying the state's electoral votes for the 2016 presidential election?
We were told that the Capitol had been secured and that we were going to be able to head back to the Capitol, and there would likely be speeches by leaders of the both chambers and then the debate and the Congress.
And what did you expect would happen when you returned to the chamber in terms of the debate?
Well, certainly that we would just go back to what we had done in 2017 and 2013, which was to not see a contest of the count, considering violence that occurred. And so when we learned, when I learned, and my Democratic colleagues learned, that there were going to be further challenges, it was unsettling because we believed that that could still invite further violence. And it's also our team sentiment that after we just went through all this, we would really go back to trying to challenge the election and believe that the Vice President could do something about it.
About how long had you been gone when you returned to the chamber?
It was about 5 hours that I'd been in the evacuation room and then walked through the cannon tunnel, which connects the House office buildings to the chamber, that I and my colleagues walked back over to wait for the day.
And what did you observe in the chamber on your way back in?
I went through the back double doors, and again, to reorient you, these are the doors for safety when the president would enter. Those are the doors that on the other side, the chamber side, Capitol Police and some Republican colleagues had been putting furniture against during the attack on the Capitol. And I stepped over glass, and the Capitol Police officer told me to be careful. I was among one of the first groups to go back, so they were still sweeping up a cleaning group. I was sweeping up glass as you stepped into the chamber. And then when I stepped into the chamber, I noticed two individuals wearing a blue FBI technician jacket, and they were taking photographs and conducting measurements on the House floor.
And was that unusual?
I've never seen, the photographs are not allowed on the House floor, so I don't know why. Those were the first things I remember thinking, that they're not allowed to take photos of the House floor, but of course it didn't become a crime scene. I guess it was unusual.
How were other members reacting, in your view?
There was a lot of anxiety that the debate would continue, and we were I don't want to speak about it. I was unclear, and the people I spoke to were unclear.
Hold on just 1 second, Congressman. There's a siren coming by the courtroom.
You can start again, sorry.
I was anxious because I feared that we were going to continue to challenge, that if Republicans were going to continue to challenge the outcome, that the mob could return, and that the scene on the floor could also become combustible among the members.
Did you hear any meaningful speeches?
Well, one contentious moment was during the challenge of the Pennsylvania result, and I was seated directly behind Connor Lamb, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, as he defended the count in Pennsylvania. And Connor began his remarks essentially saying, before the riot, he prepared remarks that was going to show deference and respect to the Republican challenges, but considering that the riot occurred, we're still doing this, they're not worthy of his respect. And then a Republican from Maryland, Andy Harris, started shouting down Connor, and then some of my Democratic colleagues beelined over to Andy Harris, who was behind me, and told him to let Connor finish. I jumped up and went over, and I saw that Andy Harris and Democrat Colin Allred, a former NFL player from Texas, were essentially in an argument. And I recall yelling at Andy, "You don't want to do that, Andy. You used to tackle people for a living. Andy, you don't want to do that." Unfortunately, it stopped there.
Did Congress ultimately finish the counting and certifying of the state's electoral votes for the 2016 presidential election that evening?
We did. It was in the 3 o'clock a.m. hour the next day.
And what was the very last act of the night?
It was Vice President Pence presiding the joint session, receiving the tallying from the towers and declaring that Joseph R. Biden was the winner and would be inaugurated on January 20th.
What time did you get home that night?
I got home just after 4 a.m.
And what happened when you returned home?
I was greeted by my wife, as well as late nights at the Capitol. That was the first time she'd ever wake up for me, and gave her a big hug, and then went up and did something my household would never do with little children, which is to go into their room when they're sleeping, and I just gave both of them kisses on the forehead.
After January 6th, 2021, what conclusion, if any, did you come to as to what or who caused or instigated the attack on the Capitol?
Objection. The conclusions are not relevant, Your Honor.
Sustained.
In the aftermath of the attack, did Congress consider any action against Donald Trump for his role in the attack?
As we were in the evacuation room, colleagues of mine on the Judiciary Committee, David Cicilline, Ted Lieu, and Joe DeGuze, were already thinking about what we would have to do legislatively to make sure that the inauguration could take place if we did finish the count. And so within days, Speaker Pelosi, working with them, would bring forward articles of impeachment, and that would be voted on, or debated and voted on 1 week later on January 13th.
How did you vote on the impeachment?
I voted with my Democratic colleagues and 10 other Republican colleagues to impeach on account of insurrection.
And what role did you have, if any, in those proceedings, those impeachment proceedings?
A few hours before the vote, Speaker Pelosi called me and asked me if I would serve as an impeachment manager on the impeachment team in the Senate. And I accepted it and would be a part of the 9-person impeachment manager team led by lead manager ShhSocials.
And you testified a moment ago that there were Democrats and Republicans that voted in favor of the impeachment. Did that vote result in an impeachment of the president by the House?
Yes, on January 13th in the evening, President Donald Trump was impeached a second time by the House.
Was there a trial in the Senate?
There was, yes.
And what was the result of that trial?
In the Senate, the President, 50 Democrats and 7 Republicans voted that the President had indeed committed insurrection, although that would be 10 votes short of the 2/3 requirement for removal.
Did any Republican senators who voted against conviction publicly reveal reasons for their vote?
Objection, Your Honor, this is not relevant.
Your Honor, I'll try to tie it together here with another question.
Overruled.
Do you want me to repeat the question, Congressman? Okay.
Shortly after the Senate proceedings, Leader McConnell went to the floor and said that this vote to acquit did not mean that Donald Trump would escape accountability at all, and that there were other legal means, civilly and criminally, that were holding him up.
As a member of the House of Representatives, Congressman Swalwell, are you required to take an oath of office?
Yes, I could take it every other year if elected on January 3rd.
And does that include an oath to the Constitution?
Yes, it does.
And what do you understand that oath to the Constitution to mean?
That oath predominates my loyalty to anything else, and I have a duty to defend and protect it.
No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Good afternoon, Representative Swalwell.
Good afternoon, Counsel.
Am I correct that you weren't injured on January 6th?
I was not. No, not this one.
Yet you are the plaintiff in a personal injury lawsuit that you brought against Donald Trump in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you're seeking damages in that lawsuit?
Unstated, but yes, meaning no dollar amount.
And as a lawyer, you understand that if this proceeding against President Trump is successful, that would improve your chances of success in that lawsuit, correct?
Could you repeat this question?
Yeah. You're a lawyer, are you not?
Yes.
And you understand that if this case goes against President Trump, that likely increases your probability of success in your personal injury lawsuit against him, right?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Goes to bias, Your Honor.
Overruled.
I'll leave it to the legal experts as to what this means for a separate lawsuit. I don't know.
Is it your view, sir, that President Trump has some, or had some, lesser quantum of First Amendment rights than every other American on January 6th?
No, it's not right.
So he enjoyed the full, as far as you're concerned, he had every right that every other American had to speak with full First Amendment protections on that date?
In accordance with the law, yes.
And you pointed out that during his January 6th speech, he used the phrase fight and fight like hell, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you would acknowledge that that is in fact common, or not, certainly not uncommon discourse in political circles during speeches, right?
I'm sorry, could you clarify?
Yeah, politicians often say fight or fight like hell or words like that, right, when they give speeches.
Yes, sir.
You've done it yourself, right?
I have.
Many of your Democratic colleagues do that too, right?
That's right. That's correct.
Okay. And when you do it, you're not calling for physical violence, right?
I'm not.
And you're not saying that your Democratic colleagues are calling for physical violence, right?
In my experience, that's not how I interpret it, no.
And you judge that by the words that are said, right?
And the surroundings of where they are, yes.
I'd like to show you Exhibit 1066, which is was designated as a cross exhibit. Well, I'm not asking you to put it up on the screen. I'm asking, did you have an objection to that?
Oh, no.
Okay. Could you put up Exhibit 1066, please?
Are you asking for it to be admitted?
I will, yes, since there appears to be no objection. Can it be admitted, Your Honor?
Yeah, 1066 is admitted.
Okay. And sir, I will represent to you that this is a collection of tweets from your Twitter account. And I'm sorry. We're having a slight technical snafu, so I ask you to bear with us. I'm not going to go through all of these, sir, but why don't we look at page 16 first? So if you put page 16 up, you recognize that as a tweet from your verified Twitter account dated May 2nd, 2022?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And if you think they'll stop with a woman's right to choose, you haven't been paying attention. We have to fight like our lives depend on it, because clearly they do. You wrote that, right?
Yes, I did.
And you were not calling for any sort of physical fight, correct?
No, sir.
You were not advocating violence?
I was not.
And if you look at the next page, please. Okay, and this is another tweet from your verified account, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you wrote, this is just the beginning, they won't stop. Fight like your lives depend on it, because they do, right?
It says hashtag vote blue. Yes.
Yeah. And again, you were not calling for physical violence, that was a metaphorical fight, right?
Correct.
And I'll go through a bunch more examples, but I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on that. There was one other, I think one of the three I should ask you about. Please. Is this a tweet from your verified Twitter account dated February 4th, 2022?
Looks like it, yes.
Okay. And you're right there. Party, but in this fight, we're all on the same side. You see that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what fight were you referring to here?
I haven't seen the tweet above it to have context, but I'm assuming, based on the date, that it refers to the January 6th investigation. But again,
When you say the January 6th investigation, you mean the January 6th Select Committee? Okay, and that was because Representatives Cheney and Kinzinger were the two Republican members who Speaker Pelosi had appointed to that committee. Is that right? And you considered them to be on your side of that fight, correct?
yes.
Okay. All right, we'll put that exhibit aside. Now, earlier today, Council showed you some tweets by President Trump. You remember that?
I do.
Did Council pick which tweets they were going to show you, or did you discuss with them which tweets you wanted to testify about?
Those are council.
Did you have an objection?
So,
I'm sorry, so now I missed the, can you repeat the question again, sir?
I think he said that they were chosen by Council, Your Honor. So, one that the Council focused on, if you would put up the 2:24 p.m., so this is Exhibit 148, page 83 in that first one. Do you remember discussing this one from 2:24 p.m.?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And then, if you go to the next page, the second tweet on that page. And you remember discussing the second tweet at 6:01 from 6:01 p.m.?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now let's look at the two that Council decided to skip that were right in between those two. Okay? Let's look first at the tweet from 15 minutes after the first one you discussed at 2:24 p.m. Page 83, second tweet on the page.
I see it.
Okay? And at 2:38 p.m., 15 minutes or so after the tweet that you discussed about Vice President Pence, you see that President Trump wrote, "Please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful." Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember reading that on January 6th?
I do.
Okay. What did you understand that tweet to mean?
That we needed 10 exits before he said it, before the mob had come, but he, I imagine, had seen the violence committed against the officers and believed that he had power because he sent them there to stop them from abusing officers.
So that's what, sorry, strike that. So whether he had the power or not, certainly he's telling people to support our Capitol Police and law enforcement and stay peaceful, right?
In that tweet, yes.
Yeah. And he told them that in his speech, right? He told them to proceed peaceably and patriotically to the Capitol, right?
You have to play that for me, I know.
Okay, well, the judges heard it, so I'm not going to take the time to replay that now. Let's look at the next tweet that he sent at 3:13 p.m. If you put that up, please. You see that tweet? He says, "I'm asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence!" Exclamation mark. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you! Exclamation mark. You see that?
I do, sir. That.
Okay. Do you remember reading that on January 6th?
I do, yes.
Okay. What did you understand that to mean on January 6th, sir?
That a lot of violence had taken place. At that time, I was, as I said, probably just arriving with a gas mask in my hand to the evacuation room, and the president is asking the violent rioters to stop attacking the police.
Okay. So that's a couple of posts between the two posts that you had previously discussed where the president is asking people to stop attacking and be peaceful, right?
In these tweets, yes.
In those tweets. And we looked at a short video of about 1 minute where he asked people to do exactly the same thing, right? To be peaceful.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah. And that came somewhere in the 3 o'clock hour, so presumably around or slightly after that 3:13 p.m. tweet, right?
That's not right, yes.
Yeah. I'm done with that document, thank you. I don't have any further questions to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from other questions from the party about the Secretary of State? Okay, redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Very briefly, Congressman Swalwell, in colloquy with counsel just a moment ago, he asked you about 2 other tweets that Mr. Trump sent. In either of those tweets, did Mr. Trump ask people to go home?
No.
And did he ask people to leave the Capitol?
Those are-
Thank you.
Congressman Swalwell, I think you're done. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your Honor, Mario Nicholas on behalf of the petitioners, and we are going to call Officer Winston Pajon as our next witness.
Yes, you said it's pronounced Pinjon?
Pajon.
Pinjon, okay. Hold on 1 second. You raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear, under the penalty of law, that the testimony you will give before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. So, please sit down and just make sure to speak into the microphone, okay? You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Officer Pajon. Would you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Winston Pajon, Winston Pingeon.
Officer Pajon, where did you go to college?
I went to American University in Washington, D.C.
And what degree did you receive there?
I received a bachelor's in justice and law, which is a criminal justice degree,
When did you receive that degree?
in May of 2016.
Where did you go to work after you graduated from American University?
I joined the United States Capitol Police as a police officer,
And roughly when was that?
June of 2016.
Are you still currently employed with the USCP?
I have not, no.
When did you leave the USCP?
I left the department in October of 2021.
Okay. During the course of your career with USCP, what units were you assigned to?
I was primarily assigned to the House Division, but I also served on a variety of other collateral assignments, the Ceremonial Unit or Honor Guard, the Special Operations Division, and the Civil Disturbance Unit.
Can you describe for the court what the Civil Disturbance Unit is?
Yes, the Civil Disturbance Unit is effectively the riot team for the Capitol Police.
Prior to January 6th, 2021, were you ever deployed as a part of the CDU?
Yes, I was multiple times.
Can you describe just briefly some of your deployments prior to January 6th?
Yes, for large-scale protests or events that numerous people come to the Capitol, we were deployed, sometimes in Florida gear, sometimes with our gear just on standby. But it was commonplace for CDU to be deployed for a variety of events of groups that would come and protest or demonstrate around the Capitol.
Can you provide the court with some examples of those other events?
Yes, a few in the summer of 2020, of Black Lives Matter protests, as well as 2 different ones in November and December of 2020 in protesting the results of the election.
During those prior events, did you witness any violence at those events?
Nothing large scale, no. But there were times where we would have to arrest people, but no major violence, no.
And did you ever feel when you were serving in the CDU at those prior events that your unit would be overrun?
No.
Were your lines ever broken in those prior events?
No.
Did you ever fear for your life during any of those prior events?
No.
Officer Pajon, I want to take you to January 6th, 2021. Were you on duty that day?
Yes, I was.
When did you report for duty on January 6th?
I reported at approximately 8 or 9 a.m. that morning.
And were you assigned to your regular duty or to a separate unit?
I was assigned to CDU that morning. My normal assignment at that time was 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., so I was working overtime early with CDU.
What is your understanding of why that changed?
I understood that to be the case because of what Congress was doing that day, of certifying the results of the election, as well as the former president was hosting a rally or event near the White House.
Okay. How many officers were in your CDU squad that day?
In my squad, there were approximately 25 to 30 of us.
Okay. Officer Pajon, I'm going to ask you just a couple questions about, I want to bring up what's previously been marked as Exhibit P-163, Your Honor. Sorry, got another one. Officer Pajon, as a USCP officer, are you familiar with the layout of the U.S. Capitol itself?
Yes, I am.
And how are you familiar with the layout of the Capitol?
I'm familiar with it because I spent 5 years there and worked at numerous events, and so I spent a significant amount of time in the Capitol and around the Capitol grounds over my career there.
Okay. And are you familiar with the Capitol grounds as well?
Yes, very much so.
All right, so I brought up what is Plaintiff's Exhibit 163, and I'd like you to take a look at it. Have you reviewed this exhibit before?
Yes, I have.
Would you say that it's a fair and accurate representation of the Capitol grounds and one level of the U.S. Capitol?
Yes, it is.
Would you say that this would help you to explain your testimony to the court?
Yes, it would.
Your Honor, I'd like to, at this time, move to admit Plaintiff's Exhibit 163 as a demonstrative exhibit.
Your Honor, can I get some clarification? Is this a general representation of Capitol grounds, or is it a representation of some specific time? Because there are all sorts of markings and
Your Honor, let me.
there are all sorts of markings and annotations on this.
Oh, I don't think either one of them is really good at admissibility, so I'm going to admit the exhibit, and you can ask questions about what they are, and you can certainly answer them cross-examination.
I'll tell you what. I'll try to actually lay some foundation for that, Your Honor. Officer Pajon, were you around the Capitol and the Capitol grounds prior to January 6th and in the weeks leading up to that?
I was on leave the week of Christmas of 2020, but so I believe my first day back on duty was that Monday, January 4th, I think.
Okay. And so when you were you familiar with some of the additional things that barricades and things that were placed there prior to the inauguration?
Yes.
And does this exhibit does it accurately and fairly represent some of those additional structures that were placed there?
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Officer Pajon. Okay, I'd like to go to go back to January 6th and talk to you a little bit about that. Where did your group, your squad, ultimately stage from?
We had a roll call in the Long House Office building, but we ultimately staged in what we call the truck tunnel along New Jersey Avenue and Constitution Avenue in the northwest. So
Okay, so I'm gonna use my mouse here.
Yes.
And if you can direct me towards where you were talking about.
So approximately this area right here, New Jersey Avenue.
What is that?
Well, so where your cursor is now is where we had the roll call initially, and opposite from that on that, about there, is where we staged and waited for the orders.
Okay, so you were waiting for further orders. What time was this roughly that you were staged over there?
That was approximately 11 a.m. or so.
Okay. Were you told to do any? How were you to receive further orders?
Yes, my lieutenant, who was my commander that day, told us to put our rank down around that time.
Okay. Do you remember getting a call on the radio later that day?
Yes, I do.
And what was that call? What did you hear in that call?
In that call, I heard that one of our outer perimeter lines had been breached and that the officers there had been overrun. And I remember distinctly hearing the need for help in the officer's voice. As a police officer, you know when something's not right. You can hear it in people's voices on the radio. And that was one of those times.
And why were they calling for the CDU at that point?
They needed additional officers to respond. And because we were with the CDU, and more specifically the CDU Hard Squad in 4 gear, they needed us to go assist to back them up.
Can you describe the gear you put on that day?
Yes, the CDU gear is similar to hockey or football pads of chest protector over my bulker vest, arm protectors, groin protector, thigh protectors, shin pads, as well as additional gear on my belt like my PR-24 baton, my gas mask, and we had protective sunglasses too in case of lasers being pointed at us.
Okay. Were you wearing a body camera at that time?
No, I was not. I was never issued a body camera, and no Capitol Police officer at that time wore body cameras.
All right. You said that you had a call from, where was it you said you received a call from?
The call came from the near Peace Circle where Pennsylvania Avenue meets the meets the Capitol.
I'd like you to take a look at the map again. And is this roughly where where you're talking about you received the call from?
Yes.
And what was going on in the peace circle at that time, as you understood it?
The call for help was that the line had been breached and that people had pushed past those officers and were making their way towards the Capitol.
In response to that call, what did your squad do?
We responded over to assist.
And so, as I understand it, is this roughly where you were at, where my pointer is?
Yes, in that rough area.
And what was your path to respond?
So we were on a Capitol Police bus, and the bus took us through the North Barricade, which is where Delaware Avenue meets Constitution Avenue. We went straight south from there, and then curved along down the Northwest Drive to approximately where it says the Summer House. That's where we stopped.
And is that roughly here?
Yes, that's correct.
When you stopped at that and what's in that summer house area? Can you describe it a little bit for the court?
Yes, it's there's some trees, and it's I don't know the full history of it, but it's a historic old function, and the white lines there are pedestrian walkways, so it's an area where tourists or people, neighbors would often jog or bike or walk their dog.
Okay. What did you see when you got out there near the summer house?
From there, I could see that already individuals in the crowd had made their way up closer to the lower west terrace of the Capitol.
I see you're pointing at the map, so I just want to, for the court circle. So you said originally the call came from the Peace Circle because there's a barricade, and you said that, where were they making their way up to?
So they continued, I guess that's southeast, along what we call the Pennsylvania Avenue walkway, because the road ends at Peace Circle, but that white area where your mouse is, that's the walkway, and people had made their way up that.
And what's at the end of that walkway?
The stairs, there's stairs, and at that time there were construction parts of the inauguration stage.
So how long between when you received the call and when you got there and saw people make it already to the stage? How long was that?
Approximately 5 minutes or less even.
Okay. How would you describe the crowd that you saw when you got out?
From there I could see that they were dressed in numerous Trump apparel, red hats, and carrying flags, and that they were advancing quickly, and that the crowd was already growing larger just by the minute.
Okay. When you got out, did you put on any additional gear at that point?
Yes, I did.
What did you put on? What additional gear?
I put on my gas mask.
Had you ever worn your gas mask in the line of duty before?
No, only in an environment.
And why were you told to put on a gas mask on this day?
There were calls that potentially gas either was already deployed or was soon to be deployed. So the decision was made that we would do that in order to be best prepared.
Okay. So I want to go back. You were here and you got out. So is this roughly where you were putting on your gas mask?
Yes.
Where did you go from there?
From there, we marched, we formed out and marched as best we could to the steps, and ended up in the area here, sort of northwest lawn, along that walkway, and we ended up right in that grassy area where your mouse is now.
Tell you what, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, Officer Pajon, so you can see it a little bit better. Okay. So you said right about here on the map?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. As you were arriving there, did you see anyone in medical distress?
Yes, I did.
And what did you see?
I saw an individual being carried out on a stretcher, and somebody performing CPR on that person.
How did the crowd react to the first responders providing medical care?
Well, it was mixed, but I wasn't seeing the other person in need of medical care, where at that point, Bob had turned hostile and was assaulting officers that were trying to go and help the second person in distress.
Officer Pajon, so from this position where my cursor is currently at, from where your squad was deployed, could you see beyond the immediate area around you?
Yes, I could.
And why could you see beyond the immediate area?
Primarily because of the elevation of Capitol Hill that I could see, and just the direction of how we were sort of lined up close to Pennsylvania Avenue, that I could see down Pennsylvania Avenue looking towards downtown DC.
So would that be looking out over the Peace Circle?
Yes, facing west.
And how far beyond that could you see?
I could probably see 10 or so blocks until the road totally shifts.
And what did you see when you looked in that direction?
When I looked down there, I could see that there appeared to be thousands of people coming towards the Capitol.
And they were coming towards the Capitol along what route?
Along Pennsylvania Avenue.
Did you notice anything unusual about what members of the mob were wearing while you were on the Northwest Lawn?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
That was the equipment that some of them were wearing, to include things like helmets, goggles, what appeared to me to be body armor, paramilitary style gear equipment that they were wearing.
As a USCP officer, did that concern you?
Yes, it did.
And why did that concern you?
It concerned me because I had not seen that before, and because we don't typically face people who appear to me to be prepared for physical altercations or violence.
Okay. Can you describe any interactions between your unit and members of the mob while you were on the Northwest Terrace lawn, so roughly where my pointer is?
Yes, they were saying things to us as they would continue to say throughout the day. Things like Trump sent us, and things like we don't want to hurt you, but we will. We're getting in that building, and of course chanting things like stop the steal and a variety of other pro-Trump messages like that.
Were either you or any of the members of your squad physically assaulted in that area?
Yes, members of my squad there started to be assaulted, pushed, and pepper sprayed by members of the mob.
Could you see could you see members of the mob engage with other law enforcement units in the vicinity?
Yes, I could.
And what did you see?
From where I was posted, I could see that what's marked here is the Northwest Steps, that the mob was advancing up those steps and engaging with other Capitol Police officers and assaulting them with what appeared to me to be pieces of construction materials and flagpoles and other things like that that they were striking officers with, and also striking them with what appeared to me to be pepper spray and chemical irritants.
Okay. How long roughly were you at that position on the Northwest lawn?
I was there for approximately an hour, maybe a little bit more.
And in that time, what change in size or nature of the mob did you observe?
Well, the size of it, like I said, continued to grow larger, and they seemingly became more emboldened by that size. That it was apparent to me we were very outnumbered.
Do you remember your attackers saying or doing anything that would have indicated what they were trying to do?
Yes.
And what was that?
Well, like I said, they some of them told me that they were there to break inside and to get into the U.S. Capitol.
Did any of them threaten you?
Yes, they did.
And how did they threaten you?
Oh, well, saying things like, we don't want to hurt you, but we will, and other taunts of saying, you look scared, and you might need your baton, or stuff like that.
You said you were there for roughly an hour, from 1 to 2. Was that accurate?
Yes, approximately.
Was your CDU unit able to hold the line at the base of the West Terrace?
No, we were not.
And why weren't you able to hold that line?
We were not able to hold that line because the mob became increasingly aggressive and hostile towards us, and we were simply outnumbered. So ultimately, the 25, 30 of us or so sort of ended up forming a circle where we were guarding nothing but each other's backs as the mob sort of surrounded us there.
Okay. Did you eventually leave that position?
Yes, I did.
And where did you decide to go from there?
So I knew that we needed to get to the Upper West Terrace to have that high ground strategic advantage because I could see the progress that they had made and were making up those Northwest Steps. We needed to go help those officers.
Can you describe the path that you took to get there?
Yes. Basically, I went kind of along the corner of the Capitol here, up the Northwest lawn, up the North lawn, and was able to access the Upper West Terrace again via this North access path.
And where did you go from there, Officer Pajon?
From there, I knew we needed to get back to where those steps were, so I continued west or down along the North Terrace, where that green line is, and I kind of followed that green line over.
And Officer Pajon, how many members of your squad were with you at that time?
Well, I thought that the whole squad was with me, but I soon learned that we were getting separated, and given the nature of having all of our riot gear on and having to go up the hill and be impeded by some members of the mob as well, it took some time and we got separated. So I soon learned that it was just myself and 3 or 4 other officers.
Okay. So you said you were going along the North Terrace and walking down or west at this point.
Yes.
Where did you stop there? Did you continue on?
I continued and rounded the first corner and continued to go to assist those other officers and help them in the building.
And when you got to this corner here, Officer Pajon, what did you see?
From there, I was horrified to see that there were many members of the mob who had already flooded up into that area of the Upper West Terrace.
Roughly there?
More so sort of over here, but I could see all the way down, but they were more in the sort of circle area. From that point I can see.
Okay. And when you rounded that corner, did you stop there?
No, I didn't, so I continued forward because, again, I knew I needed to do my job and respond and get there as quickly as I could.
When you said you continued forward, what direction were you going?
Yes, so at this point I was going southbound, so again, kind of tracing that green line over to that northwest courtyard area.
And Officer Pajon, what did you see when you got roughly here on the map?
So again, was also horrified even more to see that they had broken into the building and that the mob was streaming inside into the U.S. Capitol.
When you said they had gotten access, what had they gotten, how had they gotten access? How had they gotten in?
Well, from there I could see that they were entering where the red arrow is here, which is an emergency exit fire door. So I assume that they had broken their way in because those doors are locked and secured normally.
I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that it's easier to see, Officer Pajon. So, just to be clear, you said from here you saw that people were accessing through, what is this number one? What's that number one?
So where number one is this emergency exit fire door, and there are windows on either side of it.
Is that what these number 2 and 4 are?
Yes.
And what about number 3?
3 is a fire door emergency exit.
And what do you find if you go through that emergency exit?
There you'll be in the Senate side of the U.S. Capitol on the first floor there.
Okay. How many people do you think, would you estimate you saw in the Northwest Courtyard when you came around this corner?
I would say at least a few hundred, but again, it was growing because they were coming on steps as well.
And again, how many of your squad were there?
At that point, it was just myself and 3 or 4 other officers.
What did you and those 3 or 4 officers do at that point?
We continued, and I was the first officer, and I led them to go closer to those breach points in an effort to secure those and prevent further people from breaching and accessing the building.
And did the members of the mob let you through?
No, they did not.
What happened when you tried to get to those access doors?
When I tried to push forward, I was attacked by members of the mob, and I was punched in the face on my left side, and I was also pushed or attacked on the right side, and before I knew it, they had knocked me on my back. And I couldn't see anything because either my helmet had come down over my eyes and it felt like somebody was on top of me.
Were you able to maintain all of your equipment at that point?
No, I was not.
What happened to your equipment?
My PR-24 baton, which I had was holding out in my hands, was ripped from my grip and stolen from me by some person.
Were you concerned about your service weapon?
Yes, very much so.
And what did you do with that concern?
Well, because my baton had been stolen from me so quickly and so easily, I was very concerned that they would take my gun from me. So I did what I was trained to do, which was just to hold on to it as best I could and maintain that retention and control in my holster.
And this was all while you were on your back on the ground?
Yes.
Did you consider radioing for help, Officer Pajon?
I did briefly.
You did briefly, but did you actually radio for help?
No, I did not. And the reason for that was basically because we were just so outnumbered. I felt that there was help needed in many other places as well. And I didn't know if help would come or when, so that's why I didn't.
I'm sorry, what's the time frame?
How long were you at the? I'm sorry. How long were you at the Northwest lawn? What time frame?
So that would have been approximately at maybe 2:30 or so.
So this is,
I think you're saying, when were you in the Northwest Courtyard? Is that?
Yeah, approximately 2:30. So by the time I left the Lower West Terrace, and made it up. By the time I was in Lower West Terrace, it was probably an hour or so. And so by the time I got up, it was approximately 2:30.
Okay.
and your testimony is that people will go get through all 4 of those windows and fire exits?
They were going through number 3, and I couldn't see exactly, but I knew they were going through door number 1, and I think either one or both of those windows. Think about that.
All right, so we're roughly at 2:30 when that's happening, and it's roughly 2:30. You're laying on your back in the Northwest Courtyard. Did you think your life was in imminent danger?
Yes, I did.
How did you get up off the ground, Officer Pajon?
Fortunately, with the assistance of one of my squad mates, as well as just my own strength and training, I was able to get up and right myself there.
You said you were headed towards this arrow number 3. Were you ever able to get there?
Yes, well, we were just headed into where we could help and stop the breach. That just happened to be the first most accessible door. But yes, I was able to continue to find my way through to ultimately get to that door.
And what did you and your squad do when you reached that door?
We were able to close it and secure it as best we could because it is a fire door. Once it's locked from the outside, or once it's closed, it is locked from the outside.
And were you on the inside of the Capitol or outside of the Capitol after you closed the door?
We stayed on the outside, so we shut the door and continued to defend the door from the outside.
Did members of the mob who were in that courtyard say anything to you while you were there and securing the door?
Yes, they did.
And what did they say?
They said all kinds of things, similar to what they told me down previously at the Lower West Terrace. Again, we don't want to hurt you, but we will, and we took an oath to the Constitution, that we were traitors, and that they were getting the building.
Okay. Did members of that mob attack you while you were securing that door?
Yes, and they continued to throw things at myself and my fellow officers there.
Were you and your fellow officers able to hold or maintain that position at the door?
not for very long now.
Why weren't you able to hold or maintain that position?
Again, primarily because we were so outnumbered, and we, similar to before, had to effectively reevaluate very quickly and determine what we needed to do for a more strategic and tactical advantage, which was not just stand there at that point.
While you were securing that door, was anyone stopping them from going into the other breach points?
Not that I can tell, no.
Do you believe that the assault against you could have been more severe if the only point of entry was where you were guarding?
Objection. Speculation.
Sustained.
Can you describe the impression of the mob demeanor as they went through the open breaches?
Yes, at this point it had changed because they were very excited and they were cheering, and so they were celebrating because they were breaching into the building.
You said before that you found that guarding that door, that breach point, was untenable. What did you do next after deciding you couldn't keep that position?
So, again, because we couldn't keep that, because other officers also had equipment stolen from them, and we were so outnumbered, we collectively felt we needed to get inside the building to, again, get that strategic tactical advantage where we could push them out of the building and try to maintain some kind of control.
Okay, so how did you get back to the building? What path did you take?
So I effectively retraced my steps of the way I'd come, which was down and then north, effectively along that green line, and then up to where it says North Terrace and into the north door that's marked by that yellow arrow.
Officer Pajon, was your way impeded? Were you impeded in any way getting there?
Yes, it was.
And how were you impeded?
At that point, the whole of West Terrace had become overrun by people from the mob, and when I got to that door, there was many individuals trying to gain access there.
So, roughly what time? I understand you probably weren't looking at your watch, but do you have an idea of what time this was?
So that time was probably anywhere between 2:30 and 3 p.m. or so.
Okay. Were you able to make it through the north doors at any point?
I was ultimately, by forcing my way and fighting some of the numbers there to ultimately get in, because there were officers inside defending those doors, so it was difficult, but I was able to enter the building there.
When you entered the building through the north doors there, what did you see?
From there, I could see just complete chaos, and that the halls of the U.S. Capitol were overrun by this mob.
And I want to actually just ask you a little more about the layout of the U.S. Capitol. So if you're standing at the north doors and you're facing the way that arrow is facing, what can you see?
So normally you could see effectively all the way to the south door, as marked there.
I'm sorry, when you said there, I'm just going to put my marker. I saw where you were pointing. Is that roughly where you were pointing?
Yes, that's correct. So that hallway there serves like the main artery of the building on the first floor, at least. And so you typically see clear from one door all the way to the other across the whole Capitol.
How large is that hallway?
It's a standard hallway, but it's fairly large.
Did you walk down the hallway in this building before? In this courtroom?
Yes, I did.
Was it roughly as wide as that hallway?
I would say yes, maybe slightly narrower than this.
Is it roughly that long?
The hallway in the Capitol is longer. To me, it appears to be longer than the hallway here in this courthouse.
When you looked down that hallway on January 6th, and you said it was chaos, what could you see looking down the hallway?
Well, I certainly couldn't see all the way down to the end because there were some people already in the building impeding any further view of mine.
Once you were inside, what did you do?
From there, it, again, was very chaotic, but we were in that area where it says lower side corridors, and we're trying to, again, maintain or gain some kind of control to maintain and enforce some sort of order.
And when you're saying we're trying to enforce some sort of order, how did you go about doing that?
Well, primarily it was to secure the doors and try to push people back outside who had already breached and entered.
When you tried to push people outside, did they willingly go?
No, they did not.
And how would you describe your engagement with the members of that mob?
Well, it was very difficult because, again, there were so many of them, and it just sort of turned into like a back and forth where we would get some of them out and then they'd get more back in. So it's just sort of that tug of war or back and forth for a while.
Were you engaging with them from a distance, or how close were you to members of the mob?
Oh, I was very close, and in those corridors, there were many people there that I effectively was engaged in hand-to-hand combat with.
And how long, roughly, were you engaged in hand-to-hand combat in the halls of the U.S. Capitol?
For probably 2 to 3 hours.
Okay. Were you ever able to make it back from the inside to the breach point here?
Yes, I was.
And what happened when you got there? What did you and your squad do?
Well, from there, we again attempted to secure the door from the inside, but it was a similar kind of pushing and pulling of the mob, but there were some Metro Transit police officers who had responded and were assisting us there in an attempt to secure them.
What is this where my marker is right here? What does that represent?
That is a staircase that leads up to the Senate chambers, Senate gallery areas.
Did you ever engage members of the mob at those stairs?
Yes, I did, and we attempted to form a line to prevent further members of the mob from accessing upstairs, but again, with the chaos and how outnumbered we were, it was not in a position I could maintain very long.
Also in that area, I'm sorry, let me rephrase. In that area, did you see any members of the mob outside of the corridors?
Yes, in what's marked here as the Senate Parliamentarian's office.
And what did you see inside the Senate Parliamentarian's office?
Inside there, I can see that members of the mob had totally ransacked the office. They turned furniture over, they were ripping through file cabinets, pulling papers out, stealing alcohol from drawers, and just really vandalizing and just totally desecrating that office.
Okay. Officer Pajon, during the 2 to 3 hours that you were in hand-to-hand combat, were you ever near the emergency door and windows that you had talked about up here?
Yes, I was.
What happened there, Officer Pajon?
So there we were again trying to push them out, kind of back and forth, but we ultimately did as best we could to barricade those doors in an attempt to prevent any further people from coming in.
When you say barricade those doors, what did you use to barricade the doors?
We used what we could, which were primarily wooden placards, sort of information for tourists. You know, there's sort of like a small desk almost with historical information about the building and about Congress's and our country's history, and we pulled those because that was what was most immediately accessible, as well as wooden fire extinguisher holders or cases. Really anything that we could find that we could push up against that door and those windows we were using.
Did members of the mob continue attacking you through that barricade?
Yes, they did.
Do you remember any particular attack on you through that barricade?
Yes, I do.
What happened?
At one point, I distinctly remember dodging lines of pepper spray that came through the broken window there, as well as a sharpened flagpole that stabbed that came just about this close to my face.
Just for the record, Officer Pajon, you said this close to my face. How close to your face did the sharpened edge of a flagpole come?
Approximately 2 inches.
And where did the end of that flagpole finally end up?
Past my head, past my ear.
Did that cause you significant fear when that went by your head?
Yes, it did.
Why did that cause you significant fear?
Well, because of the force that was used, I was very much fearful that had it hit me in my eye, take my eye or further, that it could take my life.
Okay. During this time that you were guarding that area of the Capitol, was your radio on?
Yes, it was.
How loud did you have your radio turned up?
I had it turned up very loud because the alarms of the door breach were blaring, as well as members of the mob having megaphones and all kinds of noise from them. So I had it turned up as high, I think as high as it would go, so I could hear as best I could what was going on outside the building, or in and around the building.
Do you remember any unusual radio calls on your radio?
Yes, I do.
And what was one of the unusual calls that you heard?
One of them was that there were shots fired.
What went through your mind when you heard that there were shots fired?
I was obviously very concerned, and where my mind most immediately went to was that one of my fellow officers had potentially been shot or been shot at.
Okay. How close were members of the mob to you when you got that call?
Very close, like within arm's reach.
Do you believe that they probably could have heard that radio call as well?
Yes, I know some of them heard it because I can see how they reacted.
And how did they react to that call?
Well, some of them didn't. I guess some of them seemed hesitant about it, or perhaps uncomfortable, but by and large, most of them really didn't seem to care.
Okay. At any point in time, did you respond to an officer down radio call?
Yes, I did.
And can you explain what happened there?
Yes, there was a call for assistance for an officer down in the area beneath, under the floor where I was, in the area between where the U.S. Capitol connects underground via subway trolley cars over to the Senate side. And so I responded down in that area to assist.
When you say down that area, how did you get down there?
I went, I believe it was these stairs here.
I'm going to use my marker to show where it looks like you're pointing. Is this the accurate reflection of where you're pointing?
Yes.
So these stairs here, you went down those stairs.
Correct, and down into that lower basement area.
What did you find when you went down those stairs?
When I got down there, I saw that there were already numerous officers on scene there to assist, and so knowing that I had no additional formal medical training beyond basic first aid and CPR that I received in the academy like every other officer received, I knew that I needed to get back. Also, because I was in rank here, that I needed to go back and that I could be useful there. I needed to be more useful back where I was upstairs.
Officer Pajon, did you later find out who that officer was that was receiving help?
Yes, I did.
Who was that officer?
Officer Ryan Sicknick.
And do you know what happened to Officer Sicknick that day and the next day?
Yes, he was assaulted in line of duty that day and sprayed with chemical irritants like bear spray, and he died the next day, line of duty death.
Officer Pajon, did you attend Officer Sicknick's funeral?
Yes, I did.
In what capacity did you attend his funeral?
I was, at that point, a month or so later, assigned with my honor guard from the ceremonial unit, and I was one of the officers who guarded his remains in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol during his flying honor ceremony.
Okay. Officer Pajon, I'd like to take you back to January 6th. And so you talked about the funeral. Do you at any point in time remember seeing attackers in the crypt of the U.S. Capitol?
Yes, I do.
And so just to orient the court, is this roughly where you saw them? Is this the crypt?
Yes.
Okay. What did you do when you saw people there?
I ultimately responded to the crypt and down the stairs to the tunnel, where I believe I'd heard on the radio or talked to officers around that additional assistance was needed down there.
Officer Pajon, you said down the stairs. So these stairs, or what are we looking at?
So there's stairs underneath those. So there's sort of two sets of stairs, one on top of the other. One that leads up to the rotunda, and then one that leads down to what's marked as the tunnel, where the yellow arrow is, a hallway down that feeds right up to the inauguration stage.
Okay, so if you go down these stairs here, there's a tunnel directly to this?
Yes, that's correct. A hallway that leads up to that.
And so the inauguration balcony over here.
Correct. Yes, the tunnel opens up to the walkway right to and then you're on the stage. When the stage is built.
Is this the same tunnel that presidents use to walk out to the inauguration stage?
Yes, it is.
Okay. What do you remember seeing when you got down into that tunnel?
When I got down there, I could see that there were numerous officers with injuries, some with fairly extensive injuries, and I could see that there were officers defending that door entryway to the tunnel from the stage, that there were many officers packed in tightly as they were defending from the mob.
And do you have a rough idea when this was, what time this was?
This was probably around 5 p.m. or so.
Okay. Do you remember anyone asking for additional help at that point in time?
Yes, I do.
And what happened? What was the ask?
I believe it was a Capitol Police official was there and was yelling for fresh bodies, fresh officers to go to the front of the line.
And how did you respond at that time?
Well, at that time, I also witnessed additional officers from the Virginia State Police and Fairfax County Police had responded there. And so, knowing that there were fresh officers there, and I myself was very much not fresh after having been engaged with the mob for hours at that point, I stepped aside and let those additional officers go ahead and answer that call.
Okay. Were you ever able to exit the tunnel?
Yes, I was.
And what happened when you exited the tunnel? Where did you go?
Well, so after I sort of got to regain myself and my composure and maybe had some water or something there, I was able to exit through the tunnel. There were no longer officers guarding it. They had gone out to the stage, and so I followed and went out to the inauguration stage.
At any point, did you meet any members of the National Guard?
Yes.
And what happened when you met those members of the National Guard?
I had a conversation with a National Guard commander, command staff, and we got to talk about that day.
What did you talk about?
Well, he told me that they had been wanting to come, but they just didn't have the authorization. They were waiting and really trying to come to our assistance, but that they could not because of their orders.
How did that make you feel, Officer Pajon?
Made me feel angry and very disappointed.
Okay. After you spoke with that National Guard member, though, did you believe you needed to continue fighting, protecting the Capitol?
Well, thankfully at that time, it appeared to me that at least most of the Capitol, or the parts that I could see, as I went back through the crypt back to the set aside, that there were no longer members of the mob in there. But again, I honestly couldn't see the entire building. So I was feeling better, but I was still concerned that there could be people in the building, or that they could, and because it wasn't secure, they could have left weapons or explosives or anything that we didn't know about inside the Capitol.
Okay. Were you ever able to regroup with the rest of your squad that day?
Yes, I was.
When did that happen?
That happened probably around 6 or 7 p.m.
Okay. And where did you meet up with them?
So I was able to find a few, and then I think somebody, our lieutenant or a sergeant, called on radio for us to regroup back in the set side around those corridors.
So roughly here is where you regrouped?
Yes.
Okay. What was the condition of your squad members when you got there?
Well, not good. One of our officers would go to the hospital for injuries, and others had, similar to me, been assaulted and had equipment and gear stolen from them.
Okay. When did you finally leave the U.S. Capitol on January 6th?
Probably maybe around 7 or 8 p.m.
Okay.
We went back to Walmart to just stay in case we were further needed.
Officer Pajon, at any time during the time that you were in the U.S. Capitol, were you able to use your cell phone?
Yes, at one point.
And what did you use it for?
At one point, I was able to, when we regained some semblance of control, I was able to escape into an office to send a text message to my family.
And what did you tell your family?
I told them that I had been attacked, but I was okay, and I loved them, but that I had to go back, and then I was going back in to keep fighting.
So this was in the middle of fighting, so you had to go back again, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So this wasn't after you were done?
No.
Okay. Officer Pajon, how did you feel at the end of the day on January 6, 2021?
Physically, I was completely exhausted, and mentally, I was just devastated to see everything that had happened that I could not have even imagined, of how desecrated the building had been, and how violent the mob had been towards me and my fellow officers.
Thank you, Officer Pajon. I have no further questions, sir.
Cross-examination?
Good afternoon, sir. You mentioned the death of Officer. Try it again. Okay. All right, that's better. You mentioned earlier the death of Officer Sicknick. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And you said that it was a line of duty death. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the criteria for declaring something a line of duty death?
I'm familiar with what the chief of police tells us.
And what does the chief of police tell you?
Well, that this wasn't that line of duty death.
Okay. So you know that this particular death was declared a line of duty death, but you do not know what criteria were used to make the determination. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware that the DC medical examiner conducted an autopsy of Officer Sicknick?
I believe so, that's the standard thing to do, yes.
Do you know what the results of that autopsy were?
Not off the top of my head right now, no.
Are you aware that the DC medical examiner found that Officer Sicknick died on January 7th of natural causes, sir?
I may have heard that, but I can't, I'm not totally sure.
Are you aware that the department accepted the findings of the medical examiner, but nonetheless declared it a line of duty death?
I'm not aware, as I was just an officer, I'm not aware of the department.
Are you aware, based on your time as an officer, that it makes a difference in terms of the benefits that the survivors of an officer receive, depending on whether the department declares it a line of duty death versus a non-line of duty death?
I'm not aware of the specifics or what the differences of those are now.
Okay. You have no reason to second guess the findings of the DC medical examiner, correct?
No.
Okay. So the DC medical examiner found that Officer Sicknick's death was due to natural causes rather than to anything that occurred on January 6th. You have no reason to question that, correct?
I'm not a doctor, so I can't question your rulings.
Okay. Do you know how many demonstrations there were in DC on January 6th?
No, I do not.
Do you know if it was more than one?
Well, are you talking permanent demonstrations?
I'm not sure what you mean by permanent demonstrations. What do you mean by-
Permitted.
Oh, permitted. Yes, all right, first let's start with permitted. Do you know how many permitted demonstrations there were?
No, I do not.
Do you know if there were multiple permitted demonstrations?
All I knew at that time was that I don't even know if it was permitted or not, but all I knew at that time was that there was one big one at the White House.
So there's one at the Ellipse. That's what you mean by the White House?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know if there was another permitted one at the Supreme Court?
I do not know.
Do you know if there was another permitted one elsewhere?
No.
Okay. Do you know if there were people who were demonstrating in D.C. At unpermitted demonstrations that day?
I do not know.
Do you know how many demonstrators were in D.C. that day in total?
No.
Do you have an estimate of how many were?
Thousands at least.
Would it surprise you that estimates in the area of 120,000 have been circulated.
That would not surprise you, no.
You spoke about what you called the mob. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how are you defining the mob?
Well, I don't know the dictionary definition, but to me, a crowd turns into a mob when they are engaging in unlawful conduct and violence.
Okay, I asked a bad question, so I apologize for that. I'm asking about the mob. Was it a particular group of people on January 6th that you're referring to as the mob?
It was, I'm not quite sure, but
So if you accept for purposes of this question that there were perhaps 120,000 or that order of magnitude people in D.C. demonstrating that day, are you saying that all of those 120,000 people were the mob, or is it a subset of them?
I didn't see personally 120,000 people, so I couldn't characterize all of them as a mob.
In terms of the people who were at the Capitol during the afternoon when you were there, do you have an estimate of how many people were there?
Thousands, but I don't know the exact number now.
Somewhere in the well, let me you know that an extensive investigation has been conducted by the Department of Justice and the FBI in the wake of January 6th, correct?
Yes.
And do you know how many people have been prosecuted, roughly?
I think more than 1,000, but I don't know exactly.
About 1,200 sound right to you?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. In terms of the people who were at or around the Capitol that day, do you know what percentage of them attended the rally at the Ellipse?
No, I do not.
Do you know what percentage of the people who attended the rally at the Ellipse did not go anywhere near the Capitol that day?
No, I do not.
I take it that you don't claim any ability to read people's minds. Is that fair?
That is fair.
And just by looking at the folks who were there that day, you weren't able to tell if any particular person attended the rally at the Ellipse, right?
Correct.
And you weren't able to tell if any particular person heard President Trump speak at that rally, correct?
Correct.
And you weren't able to tell if any particular person had seen any of President Trump's tweets, correct?
That's correct.
What do you currently do for a living, sir?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Can you respond?
Yes, I think the relevance will become clear in a moment, Your Honor. What do you currently do for a living, sir?
Well, I mean, no, we asked the question when I have to.
Sorry, Your Honor.
Objection. I will allow you to answer, but if I don't find it relevant, I'll strike the answer.
I work as a sales position in a technology company.
I'm sorry, what kind of company?
A technology software company.
Do you also sell your artwork?
Yes, I do. I'm also an artist.
Is much of your artwork January 6th themed?
Well, I've been an artist for most of my life, so I've explored numerous mediums and subject matter. But yes, after January 6th, it was a source of inspiration, and I used my work as a form of healing for the trauma that I endured that day.
And you sell the artwork that you create, correct?
I do, yes.
You have an Etsy store?
I do.
And you sell your pictures for between $50 and $250 a picture, is that correct?
Some are lower, some are higher, but approximately yes.
And so far you sold about 300 pictures on your Etsy store, is that right?
I'd have to look exactly, but that sounds about right, yes.
Is it fair to say that you would like to attract more visitors to your Etsy store, to buy more pictures?
I don't understand the relevance of Census store.
I think I do, but it's the objection's overruled.
You know, as an artist, and I guess you could call it a small business owner, yes, it is attractive for me to have more customers buy my artwork.
And is it fair to say you expect that being on a televised trial like this one about January 6th is likely to raise your profile and sell more pictures about January 6th?
Objection, Your Honor. This calls for speculation. The witness.
Overruled, you can answer.
With your endorsement, perhaps?
If I can help, glad to. I have no further questions for you, sir.
Any questions from the Colorado Republican Party?
No questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Pajon, I'll try to keep this brief. Did the autopsy results of Officer Sicknick keep him from being honored in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol?
No, we did not.
And just to be clear, you guarded his body in the rotunda?
It remains, yes.
Okay. I want to go back also to, you were asked about the definition of the mob, and I want to make sure I got this right. You said a mob is a group of people who engages in unlawful conduct and violence. Does that sound roughly about what you said?
Yes.
Would you characterize the people who assaulted you on January 6th as a mob under that definition?
Yes.
Officer Pajon, there was a question about rallies and permitted events, etc. You responded you thought there was one big event at the Ellipse.
Yes.
And when you were on the Northwest lawn and you were looking down from your elevated position, what were you looking toward?
Down Pennsylvania Avenue leads towards White House and the Ellipse.
And what did you see coming down Pennsylvania Avenue?
Thousands of people coming towards the Capitol.
Okay. I'll be brief about your artwork, Officer Pajon. Is your artwork your primary source of income?
No, far from it. I wish it could be, but no.
What is the primary reason that you engage in artwork post January 6th, Officer Pajon?
Like I previously stated, it's, I always turn to art in difficult times as a creative outlet to express myself, but it became more important post January 6th as I dealt with post-traumatic stress symptoms to be able to express myself and heal from that experience by expressing myself artistically.
Are you here today to sell more artwork?
No.
Why are you here today, Officer Pajon?
I'm here today to share my story and speak the truth of what happened to me and what I saw, heard, and experienced on January 6th.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Officer Pajon, thank you so much for your testimony today. You are released.
Thank you.
We will go on break until 3:20.